Welcome back to Patient Win Insider. I'm Nick Moen, and today I'm joined by Robert Lowther, founder of the Denali Group. For nearly 2 decades, Robert has helped hundreds of dentists launch or relocate practices, handling everything from demographics and site selection to lease negotiation, design, construction, and funding. Denali is known for its full-service owner's rep model and a money-back guarantee if they don't save their clients their fee. Robert's now leading the charge on AI-driven tools to streamline business plans, lease reviews, and startup analysis. Today, we're diving into what's working, what's broken, and where the future of dental startups and real estate strategy is heading. So thanks for hopping on, Robert.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So tell me a little bit about your background. Like, where did you start and how did you end up, owner and
Oh,
founder of Denali?
well, my first career was in information technology, like Novell NetWare, Windows networking, that kind of thing. I went up the ladder very quickly because I just kind of had a knack for it. I worked for a little company called MCI WorldCom, where I oversaw a development team that managed the product testing for new products that were being rolled out by the company. We spearheaded with Cisco the voice over IP technology. And so my team was responsible for ordering the product, provisioning the product, and utilizing the product and confirming that it's billable, making sure that everything worked from a customer's perspective. And so I got exposed to a lot of different aspects of technology. When the dot-com bubble hit, we kind of took it in the shorts and they started laying people off. And the next thing you know, I was also responsible for overseeing and managing the build out of our port and presence centers, our server centers, and technology offices in 17 different countries. And I discovered that I had an interest in construction. Um, Shortly after, around 2001, 2002, yeah, WorldCom went belly up. They were sold off for parts. So I started a GC business as a builder. My best friend at the time was a dentist, and his office was, I don't want to shame the guy, but it was pretty crappy. So I talked him into letting me redo it, and I just kind of got a passion for it. And so I've been focused on dental office design and construction management for 25 years now.
Wow.
I worked for two different builders, one in Denver, Colorado, which focused on dentistry with a smattering of veterinary in there. And I just decided that I could be more impactful working directly with the dentist than working with a builder. I'd have more ability to impact that journey, as it were. And nobody was doing it, right? There were New Star consultants out there, but they were focusing only on operational aspects. None of the aspects, which are the biggest capital expenses of starting a practice, had any focus at all.
Yeah.
And so that's where Denali came in.
Cool. So, and for Denali, like, who's your ideal client, and kind of what stage are they at?
So ideally for us, we have a criteria that we're looking for when somebody's looking to start their own practice. The first is, what is their confidence at the chair? What is their skill set? What kind of services do they offer? What are they referring out? Because that's going to tell you, how big of an engine you have to drive the practice. They have to be out of dental school or residency for at least 4 years, because when you first come out of dental school, you have the academic knowledge, but you don't have the chair experience, right? Where you're flying solo, you're making the treatment plans, you're the responsible party. So there's a confidence building period, I think, that needs to take place. They need to be exposed to other environments, working for a DSO or as an associate, so they can see what they like and don't like, right? That way they can be a little bit more decisive in building their own dream practice, as it were. And I think that giving them that opportunity to breathe a little bit between graduating dental school and getting some real world experience gives them a stronger foundation to build from as they go into practice ownership.
Sure. And I mean, talking about real estate and where they end up landing, like, what impact does it have where they end up choosing? Kind of starting from day one. How do you see the ramifications there?
Well, I think For us, it's not just a matter of the location, it's a matter of the work life balance, right? I can tell you where to go and hang a shingle and you can make $1 million a year on 3 days a week, but you're not going to want to live there. Right. So, and I think, it wasn't up until I think about 15 years ago that dentists were the number one suicide cases in the country, right? And so a lot of work has been done within the dental industry to help with the mental health aspect of being a dentist, right? So I think that there's been a shift in that, you know, choosing the right place has to do with not just where the opportunity is, but what's the life balance? Is that area accessible to what's important to you outside of the office, whether that's the arts, cultural venues, or hiking, outdoor activities, that kind of thing. So when we're working with a client identifying areas of interest, we're looking at both sides of that equation. Right? Where do you want to be? What do you do when you're not working? So that we can focus the search on areas that are going to give them access to both of those things. As far as lease strategy is concerned, we want you funded. And by funded, I mean through underwriting with conditions of lending, the whole package. We know exactly what you have to work with. We know exactly what you're allowed to spend on occupancy costs. Then we go and look for space. The goal is to find two locations that will fit within the conditions of lending and that will work for the practice and the type of patient base that you want to access. We negotiate on both at the same time. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, the landlord needs to know they're not the only one that we're looking at. That breeds a little bit of competition. And two, if one location falls to the wayside, then you have the other location to continue on. You don't lose that time or that work, right? Because landlords, man, you pay them $1 more a year and they're going to take it because that's
Right.
just the nature of being a landlord, right? But as far as lease strategy, it goes into not just the economics of the lease, but the operational aspects of the lease. And I could talk for ever about that. But the goal is knowing what the end game is at the outset, right? Do you want to build the practice up and sell it within the first 10 years? Do you want to build the practice up and build your Taj Mahal and relocate it? What's the end goal? And so we look towards, the exit plan for our clients and we try to strategize towards that from the outset. So the lease has a lot to do with that. If the goal is to sell, we need to make that lease assignable, those terms assignable, without the landlord being able to step on it or prevent it, that sort of thing. We want to minimize personal liability exposure, fiscally speaking. And there's a lot of other things that go into that as well. No relocation clauses, things of that nature. So it's a whole strategy that goes in, but it's predicated on what the lending is requiring as far as what you have to do before you can disperse funds from the loan and what you can and cannot do as it relates to costs and that sort of thing.
Well, and what other mistakes do you see during site selection or at least negotiations often?
Not doing well as far as site selection is concerned, it's not doing the research, right? There's only one demographic study that looks at viability and defines what that viability is and how to access it, right? I think that the other thing that is sorely lacking is the ability to do comparative analysis of multiple areas, right? We've solved that problem here at Denali Group. It's not as well known as some other services out there, but what we're looking for is not just what's the short-term viability, what's the long-term viability, right? And if the long-term viability isn't there, then it may not make sense to go into that area, right? So I think that it's understanding the market, know your numbers, right? What's the adjusted to dentist population ratio? How much are people spending on dental services? What's their psychographic profile? Like where, when, how, why, and what do they spend their money on? And how do you get in that path to get noticed so that when they need to go in for a cleaning or a filling or whatever, your practice's name is the one that comes to mind. So there's a lot I think that goes into identifying areas that are viable. The other side of that coin too is ensuring that you have a viable landlord, right? A stable rent roll. What is your co-tenancy? What's the visibility? Depending on the type of dentistry that's being practiced, I would not put an OS or a maxillofacial surgeon in a retail center. It doesn't make
Right.
sense, right?
Yeah.
But a GP or somebody that does GP and restorative, that does make sense, depending on how much of the bread and butter work that they do, because that often leads to the higher end of dentistry, such as implants and restorative cases, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at locations, that we're not just looking at one center point. We want to look at multiple. We want them to interact with each other. The goal being to locate a site or a space that's going to be able to access multiple markets, not just one radii, right? So we want to position them because dentistry as a GP bread and butter is a cyclical. It's cycled, right? So the last 3 months of the year, the first 3 months of the year, and back to school. That's when you're going to get busy, right? So we want to have market access for new starts that can fill the rest of that schedule with other type of dentistry, Invisalign, implants, cosmetics, that sort of thing. But the market has to be able to support that. And I think it's doing the research to make sure that you can identify and define what those markets are and how to access them.
Sure. Well, talk to me about the research. Like what sort of tools are you using, and how are you using them to make informed decisions for your dentist?
So we developed and launched our demographic study application a couple years ago. And what's very unique about it is we have what we call a wizard, and it's completely customizable, right? So if you're a GP and you want to do all facts, that's all you want to do, right? And you want to work with a patient base that is uh, a certain income bracket or a certain educational bracket, you can customize in the wizard exactly what you want, right? Then you go in and tell the system where you're interested in physically being. The system will come back and tell you if the initial viability is there or not, and give you the opportunity to deselect an area and add another area, right? So the customization of the demographic study is specifically to the practitioner, all the way down to what kind of patients do you want to work with, right? Do you prefer to be in a rural area or suburban rural or suburban urban? Do you want to be in urban? Those sorts of things. And when we do that, the data values change as far as what is more viable and what's less viable based on the input from the end user, right? So it sounds very complicated. It's really not. It's quite literally just clicking some boxes. But the other thing too is like a pediodontist or a GP that's pedo focused is not going to be looking at the same data or indicators that say a cosmetic dentist would be, or an endo or a perio. And so we have to weight the value of the data points differently based on what type of dentistry and what type of patient the practitioner is interested in working with, right? Once we have that information, then our system can tell you whether an area is viable, and if so, to what extent. We actually provide what we call a Denali viability rating. It's
Oh,
very
wow.
unique to the industry. We buy data from 5 different data warehousing services, Google, Esri, and a few others, because each one provides unique information. So whenever you run a demographic study, you're getting the information as of that moment. When you click generate study, the information is of that moment, not from the last census in 2020, not from, data that's aged, up to the date, up to the minute. And again, we're not just looking at the initial viability, we're looking at the extended viability, the long term. What does that mean? It means if another practitioner comes in and is looking for the exact same patient base doing the exact same dentistry, how does that impact the viability of the area that you're going into, right? Does it diminish it? Is there an impact? That sort of thing. And I think that that's very unique in the sense that being able to identify and quantify and do side-by-side comparative analyses that shows you this area has these characteristics and these characteristics that you selected for the type of practice that you want to start. I think the other thing too is that it gives a dentist more insight as to why, right? It's like, oh, this is a great location. It's an end cap on a busy street next to a Target, which apparently is going to be going out of business any minute, but that's another story. You know, that may look great, but if their patient base is not there, that you are comfortable working with, right? Because it ties back to how comfortable you are at the chair. That's the engine that drives the practice, right? Your staff is your transmission, right? And your space is the body of the vehicle. Kind of a poor analogy, but most of my clients tend to understand it when I say it. So the key is to make sure that you understand what that market is and how to access it. I think is the benefit that comes from that. And the other thing I would say about that is doing that kind of research at the outset is critical, but you should be doing a demographics review every single year in your markets because demography changes, right? I mean, look at California. 15 years ago, California was expanding and growing, and you could just hang a shingle and make a mint, right? Fast forward to today, and it's a net negative migration into the state, right?
Yeah.
So your dentist to population adjusted ratio goes up, right? And so I think it's really important to be able to tweak your marketing and maximize your ROI. You need to know what's happening in your area year over year and look at what's changed, right? So even when you go to sell or go to buy, you need to show that, hey, this is not a 20-year practice, fully established, still has growth potential, still has this viability, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's one thing that dentists do not do on the regular that like your DSOs, they do. Like they do that all the time, right? Because they're not keeping patients long term. They're just getting new patients in the chair,
Right.
right? So I think that that's one of the things that dentists kind of overlook and don't necessarily see the value of.
So before the tool and not having demographic data, like I don't know, what did people do? Number one, and then number two, how have you seen like a direct, maybe impact on success for these dentists by using demographic tools for either marketing or lease negotiations or well, like you said, quality of life for the dentist?
So prior to the demographic study application, we did these studies manually. So it was two people, 40 hours a week for 8 weeks to sift through, order and sift through all of the data, assemble the data. And we assemble the data in three different modalities. The first is a narrative, right? Everybody learns and absorbs information differently. The second is graphically, right? So through charts and uh, graphics and things of that nature. And then finally through spreadsheets that does, the numbers breakdown side by side. So we did it manually for the first 10, 12 years. When COVID hit, rather than laying my staff off, because literally every dental practice closed across the country, right? Every job site was shut down. So we pivoted and I brought in a programmer and well, two programmers actually. And we became the SME, the subject matter expert, and they became our um, software expression of our process, right? Because everything we do is a process,
Yeah,
everything, right?
sure.
It's just different locations for different people. And so we defined the process down to the minutia details. And then we wrote software that would then do these tasks based on the input from the end user. And it took us almost a year to get it working the way it's supposed to work, right? You don't have to wait for the results. You get the study immediately, right? Whereas the other people in this industry, it's a 4 to 5 day wait. You get a complete inventory of every dentist in every area that you're going to be competing with for the same patient base,
Right.
right? And so we're getting ready to leverage AI technology to assist with that last step, what we call the dental competition inventory, right? We don't compete with dental practices, we compete with dental services and with dentists. And every DDS and every DMD has the same designations. There are no designations for your specialities like ortho, endo, perio, oral surgery, and what have you. So, and there's no database that breaks all of that down and makes it available for public purchase. We're in the process of creating that database.
And what would you say is the biggest kind of shortfall when you start working with a client and they're like, all right, we're going to open a practice, you do the demographics research. What would you say is the biggest like shortfall or shortcoming you see these new practice owners make when they're making these decisions?
Well, for our clients, a big chunk of our time is spent in the educational process, right? When we get done with a lease, our clients can tell you what's in their lease and what their landlords can and cannot do, right? I think the biggest mistake that most dentists make, and I've worked with dentists for well over 20 years, and I have learned that dentists have two primary characteristics in common. One, they're very trusting, right? I mean, you have to be to put your fingers in someone's mouth all day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have a certain level of trust that a lot of us, we just don't possess. And
Right.
I think that that kind of spills out, right? The other thing that I've learned about dentists is they tend to be very non-confrontational. Like I've seen dentists sit down and write a check for 10 grand that they knew they should not have had to write,
Mm.
right? But they would rather do that than have the uncomfortable conversation. I do not have a problem with uncomfortable conversations. I've made a career out of uncomfortable conversations. And I think the third thing, if I'm being honest, is, they come out of dental school with the word doctor in front of their name, right? And I think that comes with a certain level of expectation of laymen that don't have doctor in front of their name, that there's not a question that I could possibly ask this doctor that he doesn't or she doesn't already know, right? Because we've kind of put them on a pedestal. And I think that we have to remember these are just people, bottom line. And what I do is not magic. What they do is not magic. What I do is a skill, right? They just don't know how to do it. So I would say that and not reading everything thoroughly is probably the biggest mistakes
Yeah, well, and your
that
expertise
dentists
in
make.
reading, I mean, you've gone through plenty of leases by this point and helped build out and start up practices. So, I mean,
I
that's got to count
hate
for something,
reviewing
right?
leases. I disdain reading and reviewing leases, but I am cursed to be very good at it.
Yeah,
It's, landlords are trying to protect their interests,
right.
I'm doing an oral surgeon project out in Miami Beach, and we're at the final stage of the lease, and the most recent lease now has a clause with a 7-year buyout of
Wow.
$5,000. It's a
Okay.
10-year base, but now the landlord's thrown a clause in that says, oh, well, in 7 years, I can give you $5,000 and notice to move out.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not doing that.
that's not ideal, right? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't
So
think a
what's the
lot of people
pushback
really
look like on that?
understand. Well, there's a WTF coming, I can tell you that.
Okay.
We're
Uncomfortable
supposed to be
conversation.
at yeah, we're supposed to be at signature, right? Ready to sign this thing. And that's why we review every version of every lease is to make sure that, I mean, not all landlords are sneaky. When I talked to the broker said that the owner of the building just kind of dropped it in their lap. And that's why, and they meant to tell me, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You know, I don't really care at this point. We're not doing the deal that's in there, not without $1 million relocation package.
Right.
So, and they're not going to do that. So,
Yeah.
but that's the importance. It's reading everything and every version of everything,
Yeah.
right?
And considering
That's
the
that's
data,
really
right?
key. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Robert, thanks for hopping on and sharing your expertise. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about Denali Group and some of these tools you're building and have for demographics specifically, what's the best way they can connect with you?
Our website is thedenaligroup.net. You can call our office, 720-446-1770, or you can fill out our contact form on our website and submit it, and one of us will get back with you.
Amazing. All right.
Easy
Thanks so
peasy.
much, Robert. Thanks for hopping on Patient Win Insider. We'll talk to you soon.